Where have our manners gone? At the start of the pandemic, there was a call for support and humanity for your fellow man and woman. But as workers have returned to the office, many times on hybrid schedules, they seem to have lost their interpersonal touch. General rudeness in the workplace? Check. Being ghosted by clients? Check. Underdressed for the big meeting? Check. Bonding with colleagues? Forget about it. Join co-hosts Rob Johnson and Eileen Rochford for the latest episode of the Can You Hear Me podcast, where they ask, can't we all just get along in the office?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Can You Hear Me podcast. I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the marketing and strategy firm, The Harbinger Group.
And I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications. You know, we spend a lot of time exploring the employer-employee relationship, especially regarding return to office protocols and the dynamic of the hybrid work model. With all of that in mind, we bring you Can You Hear Me episode 31. Can't we all just get along in the office?
You know, Rob, I was recently reading an article, and this one was in the Wall Street Journal. It's titled, "What the Bleep Happened to Our Manners at Work?" It's by Callum, Borchers, I believe. And this article, it raised a ton of interesting issues related to getting along in the workplace. Honestly, the news is not good, according to this piece. More cursing, less handshaking, quitting on short notice or no notice, taking forever or maybe never returning emails, texts, Slack messages, and all sorts of internal communications. So it painted a really bleak picture. And what do we do here? We talk about best practices in business communication. So we saw this as a perfect opportunity for us to delve into what the heck's going on, maybe a little of the why this is happening, and really talk about what we can do about it. And what do we have, within our control that we can make the situation better for all of us? So that's what we're going to do today. But I'm going to start with.
And what is the why, do you think?
That's the why. That's what I'm jumping into right now. Yeah. So, and this isn't comprehensive by any stretch, but me, I read one article and then I want to go read, 30 more things that give me even more information about what the heck's going on. So this is a piecing together of that why. Essentially, increased isolation and loss of social skills, those things are all due to the pandemic. And we've read a lot about what that's occurring. It's a, kind of a byproduct, an outcome of those two-ish years where things were very, 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 very different for so many of us. And during that time, we experienced a prolonged period of being in kind of threat mode, fight or flight mode. It's been triggered and it's going to be really hard to turn that off. Now, let's look at today, right now, all these other things that are going on. And, some of these things even happened throughout the 2 years that we've just endured together. But right now we've got war. That's terrifying, right? So that's really keeping us up at night and jacking up the stress levels and the anxiety levels. We've got inflation and we've got a very real recession threat that continues to loom. And today's stock market performance, plunging us into a bear market, another bad thing, right? We've got a housing crisis. Really hard to find starter homes in particular. And so right now, nobody predicted what was going to happen to the housing market, but it's going to be pretty bleak for the next year. We've got the climate crisis that's, just kind of going on in the background, but the hurricanes that are coming on the shores in Florida by Wednesday are another severe weather incident. Those have been going on, right? There's this chasm that's widening, separating the haves and the have-nots. And then we had poor behavior by a 4-year president who modeled really bad behavior, rudeness, rejection of social norms, et cetera, that normalized a lot of that behavior. I think that's a big thing to take note of. Also, right now, we continue to have these terrible staffing shortages, the supply chain log jams, all kinds of bad things happening in the labor market. So you put all that together and we've got a pressure cooker situation. And I really can empathize with, human beings at large and understand why a lot of this is happening. So there we have it. That's our why. That's our context.
Yeah. Now I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but I think it goes really well with what the way you've just sort of framed this whole discussion, Eileen, which is it all starts during the pandemic when everybody's isolated and everybody's going through something unprecedented. And, we have a shared experience and we're all going to be nicer to each other and just be kind and things of that nature. And, now you see, everywhere you go, whether it's a restaurant or another place of business, it's like, be kind. And it's because we've forgotten to be kind. It's like we went the other way. We understood that the only way we were going to get through it, or one of the most important ways to get through it, was to show some grace and be kind. And people did that for a while. And then they were like, enough.
Yeah.
Enough. I need to do what's right for me. But then that's sort of morphed into this whole general rudeness that people think is okay. And going from 0 to flying off the hook in 2.5 seconds, you don't even graduate to it. Yeah. It's like something happens and people respond initially, not everybody, but a lot of times people respond very angrily, very quickly, and it escalates things in no time flat. And then the next thing you know, you're like, well, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And I think that's an area.
It is. And lots of psychologists that I read who are, trying their best to jump in and provide some comfort and guidance. A lot of psychologists, they kind of chalk that up to displaced anger. In the pandemic, we had multiple forms of loss of control, right? Maybe you had loss of control over your job. Maybe you had loss of control because you were terrified and your health was, directly threatened by this disease. And people who didn't adhere to, the protocols threatened you personally. And so you harbor a lot of resentment from that, or the converse, you feel that you had your individual rights taken away because you had to adhere to these protocols. There's just a lot of pent up frustration and sustained frustration. And that's where we get this displaced anger. And
then you just gave everybody about 10 reasons why people might be doing it. I mean, there's so many stressful things. It's like,
triggers.
Whether we're through with the pandemic or not, we've certainly entered a different phase of it, which is the endemic, this is something we're going to have to live with, and we're going to have to be smart about it. But we're no longer, we're no longer doing mass isolations and things of that nature. That's not where the world's going right now. But there's all these, so that part's behind, it's like, okay, that's behind me, I think. But then you have all the other things and the inflation and the interest rates. And every time they bump up interest rates, which is what they need to do to slow down inflation, the market loses, astounding amounts of money. And gas was been going down. And I noticed this past weekend, it went up 30 cents, just went up 30 cents. Again, I mean, it's still really expensive.
Volatile.
And so there's a lot of you pointed out the reasons for the pressure, but it's real and it's there.
Yeah, we are definitely in this pressure cooker situation. And each time something happens to one of us, we could have a flare up, if you will, that, is just like an eruption of displaced anger. And that's not good. We have in the workplace, which is what we're here to talk about today, the evidence of weirdness. It's like animals coming back together and having to learn how to cohabitate is kind of what we're experiencing, right? Even if it's just the 2 days a week when you're in the office, and if you're in a hybrid situation, everyone's encountering these kind of bizarre behaviors that seem foreign to us, but they're adaptive behaviors that we've all developed over that time of sustained isolation. So now as we get back together, we have to sort through, as managers, as employers, as just employees working with other employees on our team. How do we deal with all this? That's the big question that we grapple with today.
And I think that it's a really important way to sort of set the tone for this whole discussion. When you're just mentioning the Wall Street Journal article, What the Blank Happened to Our Manners at Work by Callum Borchers that you referenced, and people get a chance to read it. It came out in the past few weeks. I would urge everybody to do it because I think it really puts good context around this issue. One of the issues that was raised in this article was by a sales rep who was quoted for the article about being ghosted by clients. That's when you may have a proposal, scope of work, or maybe have sent an email detailing the next steps and you get crickets. The sales rep said that he often sends an email saying something to the effect of, based upon not hearing from you, I assume you've gone in another direction. Now, my experience, when I don't hear back from a potential client for several weeks, I send out that exact email, but it's not always what you think. So I've sent that out a couple of times recently. And I'm like, I haven't heard for, an inordinate amount of time. I would say 6 weeks, not hearing anything, not even, hey, we're doing this, we're doing whatever. And then they'll say, oh no, this happened and we had to push it back a little bit. We're still, you're still in the mix, whatever. And I still believe that I am to get this sort of business, but couldn't you have sent that earlier? I guess the answer is no. That's not what people are doing right now. People are just blowing you off and not communicating, and that's okay. And in my world, that's never been okay and never will be okay.
Right. Yeah, I've witnessed somewhat of a slowdown in response, but I do see a wide variety of ways of that people, prospective clients in this case, are handling their situations. Some are wonderfully courteous and keep us totally apprised of, internal developments that may have slowed their timeline. Even though they can't take any action and move things forward, they're still making sure that we're in the loop. And that's smart, in my opinion, on their end, because if they keep us in the loop, then we'll continue to keep their pending work requests in mind as we're staffing up or, just readjusting staffing, and then we'll still be able to accommodate them. But when you think about it from our perspective as a marketing agency, if someone raises a need, we attempt to respond and be available and, adjust things on our end, but then don't hear from them for 4 to 6 weeks. And they come back and suddenly think that they're able to activate our team to be a partner. That's just
like,
not
what do you think was happening the last 4 to 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
You're probably like, what did you think was happening?
Yeah. So it's smart for prospective clients to make the extra effort to be organized and prioritize communicating status with any prospective partner, because you could be completely shut out at this due to staffing shortages alone right now. We could turn someone away, at the drop of a hat in a way that maybe we wouldn't have in the past. Just staffing shortages in the marketplace, right?
Right.
So that plus a spike in demand from marketing support from resources like ours means it's harder. It's harder once you get in line. If you want to preserve your place in line, the way to do that is to be courteous and communicative and keep your prospective partners in the loop on what's going down.
And aside from that issue, aside from that issue that you just raised, which is very real, there's the other thing of, a lot of times what we're doing is content creation, and it's a collaborative process, and it requires buy-in and people to weigh in regularly. And so the other side of that coin is, if you don't have people that are communicating with you on a regular basis, and you are doing work with them, your ability to do good, timely work is minimized because you're not communicating. And
Definitely.
so I think there's 2 important factors on this whole issue. And the other thing is, aside from, hey, you may have to wait in line longer because, you didn't communicate with us for 6 weeks, which is what you were talking about, and you got to wait in line now. It's also, if we are doing the work and we're trying to get buy-in and we're trying to get feedback, and it's nothing, silence, that is not the way to be collaborative.
No, I totally agree. I think all of us would agree with you on that point. Yeah. So another thing that was raised in this article that I just want to mention, because it leads to a point that supports what you've been saying, Rob. In the article, I believe Callum mentioned this kind of erosion of, I don't know, what did he call it? It's etiquette related, but it's more like courteous, like, the norms of kind of social behaviors, if you will. We know things are taking longer, and there's a million reasons why they're taking longer, whether it's supply chain issues, other pressing things that have come up in front of an organization. That means you have to be super agile and respond to that. And so the thing that you were going to take up perhaps with your marketing partner is deprioritized. There's a million reasons, but things are just taking longer. Heck, it takes longer, to get your coffee at Starbucks than it ever did before. That's just wild. It's everywhere.
One of the things I learned when I first got into the consulting business, so this is unique to what I do or what we might do, is I would reach out to somebody on something that was fairly important and I wouldn't hear back. And at first it's like, why they ghosted me? So the other part of what we were saying earlier too is why were they ghosting? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, they had 17 other things to do. And guess who they get to last? When it comes time to talking about projects and the way forward, that sort of thing, the consultant, the person that's not the full-time employee. Yeah. And so I've learned that, and I've not put myself through the ringer so many times because of it. And it's been helpful. Is it rude? I don't know. I don't know if I can say in that particular instance it's rude, but it is, you feel like, man, I haven't heard. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And then all of a sudden one day, to your point, maybe a little bit earlier, but they're not asking, hey, let's get it going in 6 hours. It's like, hey, moving forward, we want to go full steam ahead, and we're ready to go. But I've been dealing with all these other things. And by I mean the person that I'm dealing with from my client. Yeah. So I think that's an important factor to raise as well.
It is. And to your point about rudeness, you're right. It's not directly rude. That's undeniable. It's not. But you know what it isn't? It's not gracious. It's not courteous, and it's not respectful. And no, it's not. I believe that one of the biggest takeaways from this whole situation is, etiquette norms may change, and they should. Come on. So many good things have come out of the lessening of the rules and regulations throughout, right. Pandemic life. So many good things. But at the same time, there is never a reason to not be respectful, particularly in a professional environment. That's just ridiculous. So above all else, I think if we all can reflect on that context that I walked us through at the start of this conversation, and really remember, we've been through a lot, each and every one of us. It's trauma. That's sustained trauma. There are impacts from that. And I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think we all understand what sustained trauma looks like now, having actually experienced it ourselves, and recognize that there's a whole lot of grace that's required. It's going to be years before we come through this and behave in ways that maybe feel more normal. And I hate that word, but, typical might be a better way to describe it. So in general, falling back on respectful behavior at all costs is going to be your right choice. And if that means you got to take a beat and you got to think about it, then do so. Take those 10 breaths.
Yeah, don't
before you hit the reply button. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally. So, just be patient, be supportive, be respectful. That's general guidance in life, but especially right now, it's a really big deal.
Agreed.
So, yeah. So, speaking of, perceived rudeness and etiquette, that awesome Wall Street Journal article mentioned, the presence of etiquette police in the office. Sometimes their presence, if you have a culture where there are a few of those people around and are harping on these kinds of things, then, the dynamic can be a lot worse. One topic that we're hearing that they like to take aim at is the dress code in the office. So we can talk about that. That's a fun one, right? Mm-hmm. Are things like ties still required? I don't even know many places where they are, but right. Maybe it's a collared shirt and jacket. What's your norm, right? When it comes to like getting together in these more important in-person meetings, and what can you get away with when it's virtual, not just dress code, but like overall behaviors, right? Let's talk about that. What are you seeing, Rob?
Well, when I left the TV business 3.5 years ago, I quit wearing ties. I haven't worn a tie, and this is before the pandemic. I haven't worn a tie in that long, but I do dress appropriate based upon who the client is. So if I'm working for one of my best clients at a mid-cap financial services firm, I go in there, I have a suit, open collar shirt, nice shoes, and that's what I look like. If I'm dealing with another group, another client, another great client who's more casual, I'll wear slacks, like an Oxford shirt, no suit, tie, none of that. And maybe I'll wear kicks. I mean, so it just depends on who I'm dealing with. And certainly in person, I'm always going to be dressed a little bit nicer. That doesn't mean that on a Zoom meeting, I'm going to be in a t-shirt and I might be in shorts, but you can't see those. But
and the
from
beauty
the waist
of
up,
Zoom.
exactly. From the waist up, I'm going to look professional based upon who I'm dealing with and based upon the fact that I'm on a Zoom call. So I'm not suggesting that everybody dress down on that, but there are different rules. And I've talked about this a lot with people that I train about where's the meeting, who are you meeting, who's your audience, I talk about that all the time. And this is relevant in this regard as well.
So the flag here is mirroring, right? Do your homework if it's a new environment for you, and say it's a sales situation, you haven't been in front of a particular organization. Do your homework and find out what's their norm, and mirror their norm, because that's just it's respectful. It demonstrates your insightfulness and lots of other important things. So I think it's a very, again, I'm going to use that word a bunch of times, I think, on this show, but it is very basic. But sounds like we need a little reminding about some of those basics, right? At least the ones we want to keep, because there's a
so what would you do?
Throw out.
So what would you do in a scenario where, let's say you're in it's a virtual call, for instance. Or no, let's say it's in person, because we're back to more in person than we were. And people are still used to, the sort of casual way of virtual meetings, but you're back in person and somebody's not dressed the way that you would expect them to. Is there a thing that you would employ? Is there something you would say, some sort of expectation you would put forth? Like, how do you deal with that? Like, if somebody's not getting the message, how do you get them the message without, embarrassing them or coming off as like heavy-handed or whatever?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we would never address it in the moment. That's just not anything to ever be done. We know that. You do it in private and, after the moment's passed, but within, very close proximity to the occurrence, so people don't forget, is also another really important thing for positive communications. I think what I would do is I would just say, I was expecting that you would be aware, because of the guidance that we gave, that this was a really important meeting. And we had hoped that you would maybe step it up a bit in the dressing department, because we want to demonstrate to this client their importance to us. And when you dress up and you're a little snappier and sharper in your dress, that I believe sends the message of respect, and that they're important to us. Again, that's the kind of thing that I might say.
That's good. But it's subtle, and it's not done, as you mentioned, it's not done right away. It's done later. And it's you setting expectations for what you want to see in the workplace, especially as you're dealing with clients. And now it's happening more and more back in person again. And people have forgotten, or they got real comfortable with what they were doing at home.
They've loosened up. Yeah.
They've loosened up. And that's not always a bad thing. No. But in this particular case, though, the mirroring thing is a perfect point that you're making.
Yeah. I will say really interesting, because, again, our firm is almost entirely remote, 90% of the time. We have started to do much more in-person stuff, much more compared to 6 months ago, right? It's funny to say that. It's still not a lot. But even in our remote interactions with clients, because I see them more present in their own, real world working environments, they're going in, and often now they're on calls with us, and it's obvious they're at their office and they've dressed accordingly. And because they're doing so, I've actually started really stepping up even my, let's say above the waist, yoga pants are still on the bottom. Absolutely. I'm not giving up comfort.
Of course.
I won't even stand up if I have to.
Right.
I'm joking, but on the top, I'm increasingly, especially in the last month or so, other than the long vacation that I was on. Ooh, that was awesome. I'm wearing blazers, jackets, smarter sweaters with collared shirts, going the extra mile, because I never want them to think that we don't take working with them as seriously as they take their job. You see what I mean?
but it's mirroring and it's knowing your audience. Again,
It is. Yeah. That mirroring. And some people just intuitively pick up on those things. Some people don't. And some people just need to be reminded if that's what your organization needs of them. Right.
Yeah, right.
And that brings up another point, which is, and this advice comes from a chief human resources officer that I know pretty well. They said that right now it's really, really important to remember that the pandemic days and ways are behind us. And it's okay to expect our team members to have things like very productive professional work setups, even if they are still working at home or on the days when they're working at home. It's okay to expect that and communicate that as an expectation and define for them what that looks like in your company's view or from your company's viewpoint. It's okay to do that. And to just point out maybe behaviors that during the pandemic, when things were just kind of being worked out and we were super duper flexible with great reason about, we understood life was going on in the background, while we were working at home, and it was all right. And we smiled, they hit the mute button, dealt with the baby in the background. All those things were A-okay. But, now the pandemic days and ways are behind us. So communicating what does, a professional, work background look like, even when you're on Zoom, right? It's time to do that, because these behaviors, according to this expert, they're going to become normalized very quickly if you don't address it now at the onset. These are early days of back at it, RTO, right? And whatever form that's taking, even in a company like mine, where we are completely still remote, we will be having conversations about, hey, we got to step it up. Just like I was saying, like I've observed, clients are really more put together now. Things are super buttoned up. Their schedules are packed again, like in major ways. We have to respond and behave accordingly. And that includes kind of what we look like in terms of attire.
That's
so
great
I just
advice.
wanted to bring that up. And so her whole be clear about your expectations, be consistent in upholding your standards, and hold your people accountable in supportive ways, constructive ways. And above all, model the behavior that you expect. And that's one of my favorite things. I've always heard that in life. And I've kind of subscribed to that school of thought, but to hear this chief human resources officer use that as a guideline, that was just yesterday morning. It was a piece of advice that I, grabbed mentally and said, I'm going to share that with our listeners when we record.
And if you put it in different terms, it's the old adage about, like, if you want respect, you have to show respect. So it's the same idea.
Sure. Same idea.
And it's very important. Okay. I want to get into this because it's not great. Grammar, our syntax, punctuation, and ability to communicate via the written word, they have eroded. And I have one word to begin this solution, the discussion about the solution, and that is Grammarly. Hugely helpful.
Again, basic.
You said that word again.
I know.
It is okay. It is basic. And I will say this, it has gotten worse. And a lot of times, when you can't be in person and you communicate more and more via text or via email or whatever the case may be, sometimes you get texts and you is the letter U and you are you, that sort of thing. But sometimes it's been sneaking up into like official emails, and that just simply can't happen. I will also say this as it relates to a former journalist, and that is, there are, because you and I, when we talked about this before we went on the recording, you said, well, didn't you learn that in school? And the answer is yes, but in TV, we would write punchy. We would write, as somebody would talk, not as flowery as perhaps, we could. And Grammarly is so helpful. And it was such a simple bit of advice that I got from somebody, and I started using it, and I realized even the simple emails they were almost there, but they weren't quite there. And it's a minor investment to make, to have excellent grammar and to look like you care. And again, you were talking about the way you look vis-a-vis a client. And if you are communicating in a very poor and sort of informal way, you're also saying, I don't take you seriously. So in terms of, dressing the part again, that also shows respect, as does, using the proper grammar and making sure that your syntax and punctuation and everything is on point.
Excellent point and very good advice. And I'll add on to this that you may think you're only communicating with the person to whom you've addressed the email, but remember that email can and very likely would be forwarded to others in the organization. So no matter the casual, close nature of your relationship with the person to whom you've directly addressed the email, you have to acknowledge that's a piece of communication that could be and likely would be shown throughout their, expanded aspects of their communication.
Just assume that lots of people are going to see it, even if you send it to one person.
Reflects on you. Yeah,
it does.
It totally does. So very important. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. I will admit I am guilty of using LMK. Let me know in Slack. But I will say, getting back to that point from Borchers' Wall Street Journal article about erosion of etiquette, and maybe some of this stuff should go by the wayside. Yeah. I'm open-minded to that idea that things become outdated, things evolve. They always do. So in internal usage, I'm okay with. Really
that's not a big deal. I don't think it's as big a deal internally. Right.
Certainly. Yeah.
But if you don't know your audience,
that depends on the culture of the organization. Right.
But if you don't know or if you wonder about your audience externally, meaning a client or potential client, and you don't know their reaction, you need to err on the side of probably formality. Yeah. But internally, I think it wouldn't be the worst thing if some of those things went by the wayside, as you just mentioned.
The shorthand slang, right? Like we use that when we talk to one another. So why wouldn't you do that in, or on your Slack channel? But I will just say, it depends on the culture of the organization. Like if you are an intern or a recently hired brand new, entry-level person at an organization, I wouldn't go charging in there, throwing your,
no
LMKs around and whatever. Right. Until you've kind of assessed, the lay of the land. How does everyone talk to each other? Right. Really study that first. Keep it more, formal, I guess, and professional initially, and certainly with good grammar, and then see as you've settled in, is some of that more acceptable? So yeah, just like survey the situation before you drive in with your casual talk.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay. So here's another one thing we want to talk about because it's fun. And this is also I think generational. Yeah. We can call it that. Yeah. So we've read in a few places that millennials are indicating that they have absolutely little interest in bonding with their coworkers outside of office hours. Heck, I don't blame them. But that's something that has been a staple, for a while in, work life of all sorts, all kinds of jobs. You go grab a beer after work and sit around, socialize, maybe commiserate a little bit, shoot some pool, throw some darts, all that kind of stuff. And honestly, I know kind of coming up in the early, say, first 10 years of working, that was one of the better parts of work. Certainly one of the more enjoyable parts of work, because lots of us made our lifelong friends there, in addition, to maybe we making some in college, right? And that's the way things were done. But what's being reported in these surveys is millennials they're not having it. They don't care. They want to go, they literally want to give the time that they have outside of work to themselves, their families, friends they already have. Socializing with coworkers is just something that they see as another thing they're being told to do and that they don't enjoy doing. And that's pretty wild. But it
also speaks to the whole 9 to 5 nature of how so many people, and I'm not going to say all young people, because some older people do too, view their jobs. So it's like,
And that's a
okay, I'm
change,
done,
too.
and now I'm done, and I'm finished. And for me, it's always been like, you do the little things. And is that one of the little things? Is that going to make or break you? Maybe not.
No.
But is it
Yeah.
one of the little things that's going to help you develop relationships that you need? Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so no, there's no requirement you should do it. And I understand the younger generation feels that way, and they can feel however they want to. But for somebody like me, I always felt like, not that I'm going out, drinking with, clients or coworkers all the time or whatever the case may be, but, moments like that have meaning. They still do,
Yeah, they do.
even if there's a generation of people that don't see it.
I'll submit here that what this means for employers is this isn't a finger pointing moment. This is a realization moment. Like, oh, if we value those interactions that are social in nature, then you're going to have to make room in your workday for those things to happen. And if it means, quarterly social events that have, an entertainment element to them where people are just hanging out, and that's treated like any other work day, but you're paying them to socialize and to get to know each other and solidify their relationships and build bonds of trust and things. So be it. If it's important to use an organization, then it can still be done. It doesn't have to be done after work hours. You just
have to be creative. And listen, you can speak to this very well because you're having these moments with your staff and your workers, and their coworkers. And so you have to figure out, how do I make this work so it's enticing, so they do want to come be a part of it?
Yeah.
Because the other part of it is too, especially when a lot of people started jobs during COVID and there was a complete disconnect, moments like that have value. So I'm not sitting here suggesting you're missing out and, listen to me and I'm all knowing or anything like that, because I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the difficulty of being isolated can be offset by the fact that you do some little things here and there. You don't have to go out with them every night after work, but occasionally you get to know somebody, you get to bond with somebody, you learn something about them. Mm-hmm. And it helps you not only be a good person, but it helps you, I think, be a good professional too, because you can retain that information and at various times understand how people tick.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's funny. Maybe that's what's driving the higher rate of interest amongst millennials versus other, currently working generations, like Gen X. The millennials have higher return to office interest. Mm-hmm. They want hybrid. They want to go. They want to be there.
Right.
So that's pretty wild, right? They want to have the interactions at work, but they don't necessarily feel it's important or needed to socialize, grab a beer, do something after work. Yeah. But they want to have the interactions at work. That's pretty interesting, isn't it?
That is interesting. Well, that's encouraging though.
Yeah, it is totally encouraging. I think that's also backs up what I was saying. Employers just have to make the moments during the workday, like not expect that it's going to happen organically after work. Yeah,
of course. Okay, so we've talked. We pointed out the can't we all get along issues and the difficulty of making your point sometimes in the workplace. But there was one bit of positive news here in the Wall Street Journal article. LinkedIn's etiquette course has an enrollment 127% higher than a year ago. That's massive. That's huge. That speaks to not only self-awareness, but desire many have to address what they may see as shortcomings. So how do you become a better person? How do you grow as a human being? You have to have self-awareness. You have to say, you know what, I could do better in this area, or I could do better in that area. And if 127% more people are taking the etiquette course, that means they're going, you know what, I maybe need to brush off a few of the tactics that I need to use to be a force in my office and to be a good coworker. So that's some good news.
The light bulbs are going off. That, ooh, this doesn't feel good. Why I'm not getting a good reaction to the way I'm doing things. Shucks. What can I do about that?
What's going on?
I know, but I don't blame them. Like we started this with the whole explanation of things that led to getting us where we are right now. And if you're isolated for that long without typical social interactions, your skills are going to get pretty dull fast.
It's a safe bet.
So dusting off the LinkedIn etiquette course and just reminding yourself the things that maybe, your kindergarten teacher or your parent told you as you were coming up is a great idea. I'm glad to see people are doing that. That's
Absolutely.
Really important.
That is.
So overall, I think my takeaways from reflecting on all of this are, one, it's okay to eliminate some of these social norms or what people used to call, rules of order, ways to behave. I don't know that they all need to be around with the rigor that they did before. And we certainly don't need etiquette police. So just chill out.
Right. Give us a break.
Yeah. Give us all a break. Totally. If something exists solely due to tradition, then maybe that one's on the table, the chopping block. Like if there isn't a modern reason for it to be there, we
don't need to do it because we've always done it. Hey, but we've always done it this way. How many times have you heard that? And you're like, well, that's not a good enough reason to keep doing it.
To me, that's a reason to not do it anymore. A lot of the time.
I agree 100% on that.
My other takeaway, Biggie, is we got to listen more, ask for feedback more, find opportunities to get not just survey, formalized feedback, but very informal moments of managers speaking, with their direct reports, team member to team member, talking about interactions that didn't go so great and not being afraid to have those conversations. Because if you let enough Slack messages go unresponded, or take, 2 days to get back to people, and that pattern, just becomes ingrained, there's a whole lot more resentment that's going to be fostered. But if you picked up your phone and made an actual phone call, which, yes, some would look at you like you have two heads by even suggesting, but the phone still works, guys.
Yes, it does. I tried it today. Actually, you and I were talking on the phone today, and it worked for many minutes.
Right?
Yeah.
We were nice to each other.
Yes,
didn't lose our shit the whole time. It's amazing.
Yeah, if we're let's get it out now before the podcast.
Get it out. That's right. So yeah. Also just that respect, can replace the word etiquette entirely. Just everything, if done in a respectful manner, that, reflects that the person's important to you, the relationship's important to you, then you're going to be okay. Just fall back on being respectful in that way. But, show some grace. We've talked about that before on the show, but this is a time to recognize, don't hold up, social norms or traditions as a reason to get angry. Yeah. Find out what's going on and kind of, work toward a better way with your coworker or whoever it is we're having the issue with.
Respect is such an easy idea, and yet it's so difficult for so many people. But you're right. I mean, it's an easy concept, but if it was so easy, we wouldn't be talking about it because putting it into practice is more complicated than you might think, but it costs nothing. And it's really, it just sets a different tone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, then just put up a little poster in your own workspace, your own "Please be kind" poster to remind yourself, please be kind.
And everybody walking by, it's a great reminder for them, but it's also a reminder for you.
That's right. Yep. It's more so a reminder. Yeah. For ourselves, because we're all guilty of it. Come on.
Of course.
That's the truth. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for another episode of Can You Hear Me, Rob? I'm Eileen Rochford.
And I'm Rob Johnson. We thank you all for listening. And we remind you that you can find Can You Hear Me wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Thanks for listening.